The Colorado Buffaloes are coming off a huge win over Orlando. So what is next for them? How good are they?
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me today, Dalton Wasserman of PFF. Dalton, how are you?
Fantastic. I'll tell you what, it's some vibe around Boulder right now, isn't there, after that win?
Boulder is buzzing. I could tell you that because, I mean, if you guys didn't know, Colorado goes into Orlando as basically 15-point underdogs at one point it was. I think 14.5 was the final line that I saw. And they won by 27. So obviously the odds makers got that one wrong. And I think a lot of people learned a lot of things about Colorado. I saw Paul Feinbaum backtracking a little bit on what he had said earlier in the year. I'd seen some other people being like, oh, this Colorado team is good. So, Dalton, from your perspective, how much better is this Colorado team on offense, on defense, just in general? How much better are they?
I think
even weeks before. Sorry.
I think they're a lot better. I think when you talk about, especially since that Nebraska game when they kind of got a little bit rattled, but I want to go back to that game real quick, the Nebraska game, even though they lost. They did not give up a point in the second half. And I think what you start to see is last year, if that Nebraska game went the way it did in the first half and the pick six happens and they're down 28-0 and it's just ugly, right? And we go back to last year, and if they got in a game like that, I really think they would have lost that game probably 52-0 because you just saw last year so many games where it caved in and they didn't have an answer and the avalanche came, right? To me, the first thing, even before all of the difference in personnel and things we're going to talk about is there is a resilience right now that we didn't see from them last year. And I know there was a couple close games, obviously the first two wins and the Colorado State game. That was fun, but this is different. They punched back a little bit in that Nebraska game, even though they didn't come back for the win. Came back against Colorado State and took care of business when the game went to overtime last year, right? And that's a rivalry, and they took care of business by 3 scores. The Baylor game, when you talk about, there was so many moments in that Baylor game where they could have caved. They were down 7 for a lot of points in that game, and their run defense kept them in it, and they just kept willing themselves to stay in the game. And then, yes, you got a Hail Mary, and I think people took that into account with this UCF line where, well, they beat Baylor, they got a Hail Mary, and then the forced fumble, and I go, yeah, but there's still something to be said for a team trying to learn how to win, having that sort of resilience they didn't have last year. And then I take it in this UCF game, look, Colorado's first 3 plays could not have gone any worse. You had 2 screens that lost 9 or 10 yards in a row, and then Shedeur throws probably the second worst throw of his season with that interception. Yep. And then they don't give up big plays right in the end zone first play. And then Preston Hodge interception in the end zone is going to go down as one of the plays of their season because they took a massive punch right on the chin with that interception. And they came right back and got the turnover and held them to 0 and basically restarted the game. I think that's the first thing for me is this Colorado team. They're punching back this year. Last year, there was too many moments where they didn't punch back. This resilience coinciding with this level of talent they have is a big deal.
Yeah, I think the resilience was a big thing. I talked about it all of last year after the Stanford game specifically is when I really began to notice it because it was like, okay, you blew a 29-point lead. And then after that, it was like as soon as someone's shoelace came untied, the team was like falling apart. It felt like the team was not mentally tough last year. And I think that's a testament to this offseason's workouts with the Marines or the Navy SEALs. I don't want to get the branch of the military wrong, but they had a military branch there doing workouts with them. And those workouts, do they really help with football? Probably not. Maybe endurance stuff, right? Maybe strength overall, but that is for straight mental toughness right there. And I think we're seeing that product now because Baylor game specifically, Will Shepherd drops that Hail Mary. Last year, I think that team would have folded, right? I think last year they would have folded after the kick return for a touchdown and the Sawyer Robinson run for a touchdown. Like, there's just so many different moments where I'm like, this team this year has a completely different mindset, and I think it's a testament to Coach Prime, what they're doing at practice. They're restarting practices. I just saw a video of him screaming at Shedeur at practice. Like, they're taking this to a whole other level, and I'm really interested to see how far they could go. Let's look at the offense real quick because I want to talk about how much they've improved from week to week – because I actually think, and this is probably crazy, and the numbers don't really the numbers don't really support this, but the eye test supports this. I think the offense has been sort of shakier than the defense this year, in the sense of they get off to slower starts. They do pick it up at the end, but they get off to slower starts, and there's like a quarter or two where it's just like, what are we doing? And so Pat Shurmur comes out in 11 personnel for what UCF's defensive coordinator said was the first time all year, pretty much. They had no tight ends on the field like 80% of the time, and then they busted out 67% of the time. And it sounds like Pat Shurmur wants to continue to do that, continue to change things up. Talk to me about how much this offense has improved week to week.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is, and I think in this UCF game, it was just a little more balanced. I'm not saying they ran the ball great, but there was enough. You got Isaiah Augustave in there. Micah Welch the last couple of weeks has given him something at running back. And again, this offensive line is still the most work in progress thing that we have on this team. But the fact that they started to get a little bit of balance and even a little bit of play action, right? You look at Travis Hunter getting that touchdown on play action, and I had to throw a tweet out there. I was like, what is this? Like, what is this Colorado team now with balance and a little bit of run game and play action? Look, they don't have to go out and run the ball like a UCF or a K-State for 300 yards a game. But if they were to just complement it with 130, 140 yards and just get something. And that includes Shedeur scrambling a little bit, right? But I like the way he's using his feet the last couple of weeks too when nobody's open, and it's pretty rare with those receivers that no one's open. But take it off running, just do things. It reminds me, it's a little bit, look, is Shedeur, is he a Jaden Daniels or a Jalen Milroe? No, but he can work to the chains, right? And I think it's something I even think about Joe Burrow. Like, he runs like 3 times a game, but it seems like it's the 3 biggest runs of the game. Or Mahomes does the same thing too. Yeah. I think Shadeur's doing that a little bit right now. And I think having that balance, having just a threat of play action, if you can get any extra half step of separation for these receivers, we know what they can do. I mean, it's as talented a group of receivers as there is in the country. So that sticks out to me, especially from this last game, as I go, oh, they're finally starting to execute just a little bit in the run game. Just that's all they need is a little bit. They just can't have this. They can't have this dynamic where Shedeur is the entire offense and they rush for 20 yards in the game, right? And they don't need much. It's 120, 130, 140 yards, which isn't as high a total as you might think it is. That's the key for me, is the balance. You can run the ball a little bit. Then it helps your pass protection because you don't have people pinning their ears back constantly. And we know the pass protection is the primary X factor here with this offense. But I think having that balance is a huge asset.
Yeah, the play action pass thing was shocking. And I think it's even more shocking that 2 of his touchdowns were on play action. And I think I'd be interested. I'm probably going to look it up while I ask you this next question. I wonder if Shedeur had any play action touchdowns at all during his first year and I guess 4 games at Colorado. Like, I don't think that was a part of their game at all. And so it's really interesting to see how far this offense has come. And Pat Shurmur, I think, is stepping into his own as a play caller, which is a little weird for an NFL veteran coach like him to say that. But there was just a certain thing missing with him where it was like, it was all or nothing. It seemed like every drive where they had to throw the ball 3 times. They had to take a shot at least once. And if it didn't work, oh, well, they'd come back and do it again. And it's like, now he's mixing things up. And Micah Welch, he may not have the best numbers. I think actually Augusta does. But I think he's the best running back on the team. I really do. I think Dallin Hayden is good if he has a better line. I do think Micah Welch can make more out of nothing. And I think that's what Colorado needs with this line because they're still not the best offense line in college football. So I think you need someone who can make something out of nothing because you are going to have to break a tackle to get to the line of scrimmage with this group. That's just how it works out sometimes. Talk to me about the defense and what you're liking from them because I know they played a lot of man, but against UCF, they kind of mixed it up a little bit.
Yeah, Robert Livingston's starting to mix it up a bit, and I like that. And we saw Travis Hunter's interception coming in zone coverage, and we've seen a few of those throughout, his year and a half in Colorado, where the zone coverage, he just has his instincts are so good, right? I mean, his instincts, his hands, everything. He knows how to finish a play. But the bigger thing to me actually is their run defense. I'm amazed right now by the turnaround in run defense, especially after we still saw them struggle with quarterback run, even against North Dakota State. Early in the game against Nebraska, they were trying to find it. But I'll tell you, coming into the year, right, the big one for me at linebacker, it was Levante Bentley and it was Trevor Woods, okay? Trevor Woods moved down from safety, still a smaller body, a safety body in there that's just not as physical. Really struggled in that North Dakota State game, the first game of the year.
Now he's redshirting. Trevor Woods is.
Oh, is he really? I didn't hear about that. Okay.
Yeah, he's done.
They took Woods out at linebacker and they put in Nakai Hill-Green. And all of the sudden, you have a defense that's just completely transformed. On top of, we've talked before about how many run defenders they went and got in the transfer portal, including Hill-Green and on the defensive line as well. But Hill-Green's presence in the front seven has changed the entire thing. One of my favorite things to watch right now, Kevin, is the end zone cam of Colorado's run defense. Because every gap, they still have to work on quarterback run a little bit. That's the hardest part, is all the option stuff and the freaky stuff. But, like, you watch their front seven, and the way Bentley and Hill-Green move together, it reminded me of like last year with the Ravens with like Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. They're just they're so in sync, and you see it on just about every play. Every gap is getting filled. You're not seeing mistakes. You're not seeing guys overrun things. It is so much more fundamentally sound in run defense up front, and those two linebackers. And look, Hill-Green for us right now has the 9th best run D grade in the country. Okay, wow. And before the UCF game, which is admittedly a really tough opponent in that aspect, he was first. He came into the game tops, and he comes out of the game 9th. And Levante Bentley's got a really good mark himself. His run D grade is above 80. It's those two guys to me. Last year, they were 122nd, Colorado's linebackers in run D grade. Yeah. Right now, they're 6th in the country. It's not just going from bad to decent. They're filling gaps in the run game at an elite level. And then to me, it's also a well-rounded effort too. Okay, so I've got 10 guys on this Colorado defense, 10 of them, who've played at least 50 run defense snaps, and their run D grade is above a 70. And that's when you start talking about, okay, if you're above a 70, we're playing like pretty good. If you get in the 80s, you're really good. If you're up in the 90s, like Hill-Green is right around there, that's elite level play. So you're getting a wide range of good play across this entire defense. Even Travis Hunter has one of the better grades on the team. We saw the forced fumble against Baylor. There's a full buy-in right now on stopping the run, not letting teams control possession, and getting the ball back in Shadur's hands. I love watching this run defense. And I know some of the stars are in the secondary with Hunter and McKinney and Hodge and Shiloh when he's healthy, but this run defense is making the biggest difference right now for the Colorado team.
Yeah, I think the run defense kind of sets up the corners like Travis Hunter or McKinney and Hodge to really make a play, because it's like, okay, we can't run the ball. Now we have to force it to one of these corners who out like Preston Hodge and DJ McKinney. I think you put them on most teams in the country. They're probably the best corner on the roster. If not, they're probably the second corner on the roster. Like, that's just how good the secondary is. And when I saw this Colorado, I think my favorite play of the game from the defense, outside of the Jalen Wester forced fumble, just because we hadn't seen a lot of him this year, and he forced a fumble, turned into a scoop and score, was I think KJ Jefferson, UCF's in the red zone. KJ Jefferson flips it to RJ Harvey randomly, and they stuff him at the 1 yard line. And it was just like every secondary member was just diving onto the tackle or the pile to make sure that he did not get in. And he was like probably the size of a laptop away from scoring a touchdown. Like, he was that close to scoring. And I think the overall effort just, I don't want to say it wasn't there last year. I just don't think they knew how to show effort all the times last year, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it takes an attitude, and it takes repeated efforts in practice and in games to swarm to the football. Those teams, everybody thinks about, defenses always swarm to the ball. That's what they do. There's not as many defenses as you think that get that many hats on the ball, right? That's an effort thing, right? And Colorado last year, you're right, we didn't see that. And you're seeing, again, I highlight Hill-Green as a big difference maker, right? Oh, yeah. But the facts are this entire Colorado defense has bought in now. They've bought in, like you mentioned, they're swarming to the football. They're punching back. They're playing with pride. I go back again to the Nebraska game where everything was awful and they're on the road and everything. They pitched a shutout in the second half, okay? The Baylor game when they're down 7 and Baylor's running the ball and everyone knows it, and they're stopping the run to get back in the game. This game, swarming to the ball on a play like that, or look, it can't be expressed how hard this is to stop this UCF run game. UCF came into this game rushing for like 380 yards a game, and Colorado held them to half of that. That takes a team effort. One guy cannot do that. So you're absolutely right. The way they're swarming to the football, the effort and resilience they're showing, it's a team-wide effort right now, and that's the type of effort that can keep your defense good all season.
Yeah, and then 2 quick things about Robert Livingston before we move on. Cameron Simon-Craig after the game said he came with no playbook and just said, what are we good at? And so that's kind of what he's based the team off of. And secondly, he came alone, right? He didn't come with a full-on staff. So Robert Livingston, he's bringing a mentality that not only changed the mentality of the players, but the coaches around him, which I think is a really unique scenario, because in most cases, coordinators love to bring their own guys. Like an offensive coordinator wants his quarterback's coach or receivers coach or defense coordinator, same thing. Like he wants his guys, and that's just not how it worked out, but it is working out for Colorado. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Colorado's fit in the landscape of the Big 12 this season. Are they contenders or are they in the middle still? This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. They have curated deals that make it easier to find the best price on great seats. They have seat views before you buy, so that way there should be no random pole. I know there's some baseball stadiums out there like Fenway that have a large pole in the middle. There's some college football stadiums that have like these weird curves. You should know exactly what you're looking for, and Game Time allows you to see exactly what your view would be. And they have their lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. It's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. Okay, Dalton from PFF. We're diving into the Big 12 playoff picture, which is very confusing at the moment, right? I think coming into the year, I was confident in saying that Utah was the best team. And now I don't know if Cam Rising will ever play a college football game again, but I do know he will be out there warming up, throwing in full pads. He just won't play. Kansas State has looked good, but looked vulnerable. UCF was a dark horse that I think we could both agree is probably middle of the pack-ish now. And then Iowa State and BYU all of a sudden are like really good. So where do you think Colorado fits into the Big 12 picture?
I think this win to me and the next game against Kansas State is obviously another huge one, especially for both teams. If Kansas State suffers a second loss in conference and if Colorado can beat them and keep proving their run defense is great. I think Colorado, I wouldn't put them in the lead right now. I think they are capable of winning the Big 12. This game, especially the way it went and dominating UCF the way they did when they were big underdogs and UCF leading the nation in rushing. Again, it's their defense for me that suddenly keeps them in it. I have said for a while now, two things are going to win the Big 12. Quarterback play, and they have the best quarterback to me in the country, and run defense. And I don't know that I don't think there's a combination. Sorry, I don't think there's a team right now playing with the combination of those two things in the conference better than Colorado. I really don't. I think Arizona's run defense comes and goes. They do have a great quarterback in Noah Fafita. Utah, the quarterback situation's up in the air. Kansas State, they play their brand of football for sure. I'd be curious to see what happens again if Colorado were to get ahead of them early, like who was it that beat K-State? Not Utah. Why am I losing it right now? Who beat Kansas State?
I want to say it was Oklahoma State, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it was BYU. Pardon me. I
BYU.
I froze on that for a second because I watched so many games. When BYU got ahead of Kansas, when BYU got ahead of Kansas State has a hard time working back from behind. It's one of those things where they have their style of ball, but their style of ball also comes back to hurt them sometimes because Avery Johnson's not the most refined passer in the world, right? Oklahoma State is struggling. I'm very worried about them. I actually think they're about to drop out of contention here. But you've got a lot of really good teams at the top of this, and I think what's becoming more and more clear is I don't think any of these teams are getting out of conference play undefeated. I think you've got an absolute war at the top of this. So Colorado, look, whether they beat K-State or not, I think is in it. I think they're capable of winning the Big 12 as much as any team in the conference.
Yeah, and I think my biggest thing with Colorado, and I did a show on this yesterday where I talked about how I view them as a team who can contend, but I need to see them play against Kansas State. But one of my main points was I don't think there's a team in the Big 12 that if Colorado goes up 14 or whatever, like they did against UCF, I don't think there's a team in the Big 12 that I can confidently get behind that can match them in a shootout, right? Like I think the Baylor game, it looked shootout-ish on the scoreboard, but it was like the kickoff return for a touchdown. They got I think they got a field goal after a big punt return. Like there was a lot of defense plays or non-offense plays that factored into that, right? And I don't think there's a team in the Big 12, maybe a Texas Tech, who I still don't understand what they are as a team. I genuinely don't, because one week they look terrible, the next week they're lighting it up on the scoreboard, but I don't think there's a team that could really go blow for blow with Colorado in the Big 12. Would you agree with that? Offensively.
In a shootout, I've said in a couple of games, I even said it before the Nebraska game, where if the game becomes about the quarterbacks, Colorado always has the advantage. And look, there's a couple other guys in the conference I really like. Noah Fafita's really good. Cam Rising, when he's in there, obviously Utah's a different team, and even guys like Garrett Green and other guys in the conference. But Colorado is always at a quarterback advantage, and it's so big. Even this game against UCF. I thought UCF would play better on offense, but I said it before the game. Look, you make this game about Shedeur versus KJ. Who wins? It's Shedeur. And right now, with the way Colorado's defense is playing, the only surefire way to beat them is pass rush. You have to get to him, and you have to get to him a lot. And we've even seen in games where he was sacked 8 times against Baylor, and he still beat him. I mean, this is just how good he is. And I think the big advantage for Colorado, there is not a team in the Big 12 with an elite pass rush. Not one. There's just I personally, I came into the year thinking the best pass rusher in the Big 12 was probably BJ Green. It's kind of underwhelmed on that side. He's playing great against the run, but there is not really any. The only elite pass rusher in the entire Big 12 might be Colin Oliver for Oklahoma State, and he might be out for the season. He's already injured. So that's the one surefire way that we know that's how you beat Colorado. Beat their offensive line, get to Shedeur, out physical them. But there's not a lot of big teams in the Big 12 capable of doing that. Actually, I think BYU might be the most interesting one, but they don't have one guy. They have a real group effort going on right now. They're just playing better team defense, just like Colorado is. Yeah. If you make this about the quarterbacks, and again, Colorado's run defense coincides with this because you don't let teams have 40 minutes of time of possession and 350 yards rushing and things like that. You get him the ball back and you give him more chances. I think facts are facts. He's the best quarterback in the conference. I think he's the best quarterback in the nation. And Travis Hunter is the best player in the nation. Right now, he should be number one in the Heisman vote if it ended today. Yeah. They have big advantages at key spots, and they have filled in gaps. I think absolutely they are in contention, especially if they win this K-State game. All bets are off now. All bets are off.
Yeah, I think the K-State game, it feels like every game I keep saying, oh, this game will be a good barometer, but it really is a good barometer because now UCF was a frisky road game. That's a tough road game. You go across the country. You already went on the road once, really, in Nebraska. Colorado State was obviously on the road, but that they were expected to win that game. And you go on the road as double-digit underdogs, and not only do you win in convincing fashion. So now it's like, okay, you can win on the road. Now it's like, can you beat the best of the best, right? Because Kansas State is considered the best of the best in the conference right now. Even though the standings indicate Iowa or BYU, I still feel more confident in Kansas State. So it'll be really interesting to see how they match up. And then Arizona right after is interesting as well because they just demoted Dino Babers at offensive coordinator, and all of a sudden things started clicking for Noah Fafita and Tetrell McMillan, which is a little scary for any defense, right? Because when those guys are clicking, they may have the best combination of anyone in college football, which is saying a lot because there's obviously Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, but those two have been doing it since they were in sixth grade, since they were wearing Velcro shoes, I think. So it's one of those things where Colorado has a chance to make a statement against Kansas State. And if they beat them, I think everyone has to take them serious as legit contenders in the Big 12. So big game coming up for Colorado. We're going to talk more about that game when we come back, but first a quick break. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get in on the action. Okay, Dalton, what's next for this Colorado team? They obviously have a bye week this week, which I talked about yesterday. The bye week this year, much better position than last year's, right? Last year's they went into the bye week after blowing a 29-0 lead. This year, they're riding high on a win, and now they know what they're capable of if they play a complete game. So they look ahead of this Kansas State team. I'll give you sort of the ESPN synopsis of it. ESPN gives Kansas State a 52.3% chance of winning. It's in Boulder, 7:15 p.m. game, Pacific time, so 10:15 p.m. I believe Eastern time, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be a late one. And obviously, we all know Kansas State probably has maybe the most dynamic backfield in all of college football with Avery Johnson, Giddens, and then, of course, the former Buff himself, Dylan Edwards. So talk to me about what you see in this game for Colorado and Kansas State.
So I think there are some challenges and there are some advantages. I'll start with the challenges you just mentioned. Those three guys, Avery Johnson, DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards, that's as tough a three in the backfield to defend it, like you mentioned, as there is in the country. And the way that their playbook works and utilizing all of those guys. And I really think, and I know Colorado fans probably hate to hear this, but Dylan Edwards has brought just a third dimension to the backfield that they didn't have last year. This speedier, versatile dimension where he'll jet sweep from the slot. He'll play with Giddens in the backfield of all three of them standing back there in kind of the pony look. There's just different things that Dylan Edwards brings to the offense that a guy like maybe Treshaun Ward didn't last year. So you have different types of runners. You've got Avery as an incredibly fast. You talk like track speed fast. Yep. Avery Johnson with so much speed at quarterback. DJ Giddens is the quietest elite back in the country. He's so physical. He can make you miss one-on-one. He runs between the tackles. He is so good. That's an NFL running back to me. No question, DJ Giddens. And Edwards brings a speed and versatility that they didn't have last year. Now, that's the challenges. And I think the biggest challenge is the difference. We saw. You're encouraged by the way they played against UCF, Colorado, right? It was spectacular. Similar-ish scheme. Kansas State leans into more of the gap run schemes, are very physical. The difference to me is that KJ Jefferson is more of a big power runner, right? 240-something pounds and all of that. And he's kind of, if you make him stop his feet, he'll stop, and he's kind of big and strong and wants to run between the tackles. Avery Johnson's speed is big because the one thing that Colorado is still working on in run defense is the quarterback run game. If you make any mistakes against Avery Johnson, he's gone. He'll take it 80 yards. He's got track speed. He's legitimately maybe the fastest quarterback in the country. Just blazing speed, especially if Colorado doesn't find the rhythm early and they fall behind and K-State gets into the groove with that run game with those three guys. It is a problem. It's an even better. I know UCF had more yards going into last week. I think K-State's run game is better than UCF's. I really do. I think they just match up so much better. Now, the advantages for Colorado. One, the run defense has improved, so they do stand a chance. I think before the season, if the analytics had this as a toss-up game, people would have said you're nuts, absolutely nuts, and probably rightfully so with the way Colorado's front seven played last year. Couple of big advantages. I'll start with their defense. If you get ahead on K-State, you have a huge advantage because this passing game is just not designed to drop back down 2 scores. Same way as UCF. You get up 2 scores early on K-State in that stadium, in that environment, you're on the right track here because Avery Johnson, very, very unrefined. The accuracy is not always all the way there. He was great against Oklahoma State last week, but Oklahoma State's defense has been struggling. It's RPOs, it's one read, it's play action. If they have to drop back, Avery Johnson is not yet equipped to come back from down 2 scores and just drop back, taking 5-step drops and throwing the football. 2, we talked about before, you want to beat Colorado? Surefire way to do it. Get to Shedeur Sanders. K-State hasn't been getting to quarterbacks, right? And let me tell you something. The Power 5, okay? You've got at the bottom of our pass rush grades in the Power 5, you have Mississippi State, Houston, and UCLA. And to me, honestly, those are probably them and Florida State. Those are probably the 3 worst teams in the Power 5. Okay, right. Yeah. The next worst one is K-State. Their pass rush grade is only a 60.7. They're really not getting to the quarterback. They don't have one dynamic pass rusher. They hardly blitz at all. You know, I know sometimes we worry about Colorado's offensive line picking up blitzes. K-State really doesn't blitz at all. They sit back in coverage, and they're not that great in coverage. There's not a single superstar player on this K-State defense. They play sound. They play like a team, but it's really just kind of, okay, let's just the same thing. Stay in the box. Our offense's run game will keep us off the field, and we'll do enough that we have to. But it's not a spectacular defense that K-State has. There are spots where you can get to it, and I think if they keep playing the way they've played the first 5 games, Shedeur's going to have a lot of clean pockets to work with, and we know what he can do in those. Yeah, I think any time now, and I feel like this was my biggest mistake in picking UCF, was I looked at UCF, saw they had 1 sack on the year,
And I was like, you know what, though? KJ Jefferson's legs are too much of a factor. And I'm not saying that Avery Johnson isn't better than KJ Jefferson, because he is as an overall, I guess, impact player. But anytime I see someone not have a at least decent pass rush, I feel like I have to ride with Colorado, because, like you said, Shedeur Sanders with a pocket is dangerous. And Shedeur Sanders with a run game that is complemented by a defense line that can't get any sort of push, very good. So I really like what Colorado had. I like the matchup, at least. And I was looking at Avery Johnson's stats in the past few games, and yeah, he's just not, it's not his game yet. I think it could be his game eventually, but even against Tulane, right, 15-23 for 180 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that game came down to the wire. I honestly think Tulane got, I think they got not cheated out of a win, but the refs definitely gave Kansas State the benefit of the doubt on. I think it was a pass interference call in the end zone or something, or a missed call in the end zone. Then Arizona, he was 14-23, and they won by a lot, but it wasn't because of his arm, right? So if Colorado gets ahead, like you said, Avery Johnson, he's not that guy yet. He's not going to be the guy that could go throw for throw with Shedeur Sanders. So I really like how they match up. If you were to sort of give a general, like, Colorado will win this game, what would it be? Like, if it was just like one thing?
If I think there's multiple ways they could win it, because anytime they get to make it about the quarterbacks. But I think the big thing for me with K-State, you know what's funny is the Arizona game for K-State when they beat Arizona 31-7. Some people will go, well, that's a statement game, and I go, actually, no, that's just what they are. They get ahead of you, they run the ball, they choke you out. Then the loss to BYU, right? People are like, oh, now K-State sucks, and I'm like, no, it's who they are. If they fall behind and they can't, and you do stop the run and they can't lean on the run game, well, that's what they are right now, is they can't come back from 2 and 3 score deficits, right? Colorado, for me, I think the most surefire way they win this game is to get ahead early. And if it was me, I know conventional wisdom now, and we just take it for granted that the team that wins the coin toss right at the beginning kicks the football away. This is a spot where I actually wouldn't do it. I would take the ball first. And as soon as I can, because again, this K-State defense, it's okay. It's not a world-beaten defense. I would try to get ahead of K-State, get them out of the game script. And I know this is a statement, and I know you're in your home stadium, and it's going to be incredibly loud and electric in that place when their defense is on the field. But I would try to get ahead. If you can get ahead on that first drive, and you can go up 7-0 on K-State, and then make that stop, and then go up 10 or 14-0, for me, I'm trying to get ahead by 2 scores as fast as possible, because you get K-State out of the comfort zone, and we've already seen them out of the comfort zone once against BYU, and it absolutely avalanched on them. They got beat down in all 3 phases, and it's because they had to start forcing things because they were behind early. Okay, Colorado, for me, there's several things I could point to schematically and personnel-wise, but to me, you want to beat K-State, jump on them, and you should be able to stay on them.
Yeah, and especially if this Colorado defense forces a turnover too. I mean, they've only forced turnovers in 2 games this year, and they both happen to be 4 each. So if this Colorado team forces turnovers, right, they're very – I won't say they're like a boomer bust defense, because the defense is a lot better, and I want to give them credit. But, like, if you give them a turnovers too, I think that ups their game even more. And Avery Johnson, in their loss to BYU, he threw 2 picks. And so I think them trying to force the issue could be really tough for their game and tough for – or work in the favor of Colorado. So really intriguing matchup. Dalton, I appreciate you for hopping on. Tell the people what you're working on, where they can find you, because I know you're busy over there.
We've got the PFF College Football Show going twice a week. We've got a review on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern, where we break down all the biggest games from the previous Saturday. Our Tuesday review, which is up, or our Tuesday preview, I should say, which is up this week already. We preview the biggest games every week. Next week, Colorado K-State is sure to be on that list, so tune into that. PFF College Football Show on YouTube.
Yeah, make sure to go check him out, and make sure to check us out over on Locked On Buffs. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Everyone have a great Wednesday, and I will see you tomorrow.